朝目が覚めるとなぜか泣いている。そういうことが時々ある。
Sometimes the greatest disasters inspire the greatest works of art.
それまではどこでも言わなかったんですけれども、
Last time I travelled all of Japan, looking for every known location from Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. This time though, I will be doing it again, for Makoto Shinkai's Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name. This will take us over 1,000 kilometers across Japan, from the streets of Tokyo to the smallest countryside towns, all in search of the places and context lying beneath this unique story. So join me for this journey across Japan and discover what exactly makes Your Name an anime masterpiece. This is Komi. It's a rural town located in Nagano Prefecture, about 3 hours from Tokyo. And by all accounts, there's not a great deal to say about it. It has a small population and no particular landmarks to speak of. But hidden beneath the surface, there's a deeper secret to this small town than meets the eye.
Because this area holds a number of small references to Mitsuha's hometown of Itomori, from Komi Station to Sakai Bridge. However, I'm not here because this place inspired the film aesthetically. It's actually because this is the hometown of the film's director, Makoto Shinkai.
僕は長野県のすごく田舎で生まれ育ったので、あまり遊ぶ場所がないというか、眺めるものもないというか、空の存在感がすごく強い場所だったんですよ。自分がすごく綺麗だと思うような空であったりとか風景の一部になりたくて、その一部になるための手段っていうのが絵を描くこととか。
Born in 1973 with the name Makoto Nitsu, Shinkai began his animation career in the video game industry, working for the Japanese developer Nihon Falcom, known for their action-based JRPGs. Here, Shinkai became familiar with early animation software, allowing him to launch his first anime short in 1999, titled She and Her Cat.
これがそうですね、20年前の一番最初のファイルです。
Produced almost entirely by himself, the 5-minute work was completed in black and white due to computer storage limitations, and it showcased many visual tropes that would later become iconic to Shinkai's style.
夏が来て、僕にもガールフレンドができた。子猫の耳だ。
今であればもっとちゃんとした企画書を書くと思うんですけど、もう自分の気持ちですね。何気ないセリフから強さや勇気を感じさせるような気持ちの良いものを目指そう。この程度だったんですね、当時思っていたことは。
In the following years, Shinkai established himself as one of Japan's most influential filmmakers, with a vast portfolio of innovative and visually stunning works, known for their rich background designs and plots centered on star-crossed lovers.
But it was his 2016 film, Your Name, that truly catapulted him to the pinnacle of Japanese cinema, a journey which began here, surrounded by these very mountains.
でその中で一番君の名はにつながる一つ大きなアイデアとなったのが、僕が君の名はを作る直前まで作っていたテレビ CM なんですね。 でその内容が、そうですね、東京に住んでいる少年と東京から遠く離れた離島に住んでいる少女がいて、その2人はまだ出会ったことがないと。ただ、お互いのことをまだ知らないんだけど、大学受験という、同じ目標に向かって2人は勉強していると。でその別々の場所に住んでいるんだけれども、いつかこの2人は出会うんじゃないかっていう物語が、もっと長編映画になりうるんじゃないか。
With this idea in mind, Shinkai drafted a story of a boy living in Tokyo and a girl living in the countryside, where the pair would swap bodies in their dreams. And to kick off this adventure, he decided to start with the girl and her life in a rural lakeside town.
The town of Itomori is actually inspired by a number of locations across Japan, but one of the most important is Lake Suwa in Nagano. It's this large, picturesque lake town surrounded by mountains on all sides, just like the movie. And just as Itomori is heavily steeped in Shinto faith in your name, Lake Suwa too is home to the Suwa Grand Shrine, one of the oldest and most important in all of Japan.
With a history dating back to the 7th century, Suwa Taisha is a Shinto landmark deeply embedded in local culture, and this significance seems particularly relevant to your name.
この映画の中には日本の伝統工芸であったりとか、それは神社とか巫女舞とか、あとはその口上酒とか。
Throughout Itomori, we find countless examples of traditions woven into the fabric of everyday life. The braiding scene, for instance, is based on kumihimo, a traditional technique which uses a wooden stand to create complex thread patterns, typically for kimonos. Whilst the festival scene showcases a ritual Shinto dance known as kagura, the choreography of which was carefully designed for the film by renowned kabuki actor Kazutaro Nakamura. However, what's truly significant about these details isn't merely the aesthetic value they bring to Itomori, it's the narrative depth they add to the story. The shrine dance, for example, was choreographed to foreshadow the comet striking the town, while the grandmother likens kumihimo to the Shinto idea of universal interconnectivity called masubi.
この映画の中では三葉が作っている組紐という伝統工芸を時間の流れに例えたり、人と人を結ぶ赤い糸に例えたりしていますけど。
But there's also a different importance to these traditional aspects.
私絶対無理。よく人前でやるよりよな。
From a character perspective, these elements create conflict in Mitsuha's life, where her desire to be a normal teenage girl is obstructed by duty and tradition.
いいに学校の人に見られたくらい。思春期前のお子様は気楽でええよね。
And this is where we begin to see Shinkai's more personal connection to the story, as he knew all too well about growing up in a small rural town.
いつも自分が観客をイメージするときに頭に思い浮かぶのは高校生ぐらいだった時の自分の姿だったりするんですね。学校から帰ってきて自分の部屋に入って一人で机に座ってなんとなくその学校の勉強する気持ちにもならず、本を読む気持ちにもならず、なんとなくぼんやりと外を見ていた時の自分。
And so whilst the design elements of Itomori were influenced most by Suwa, it seems to me that Komi has more spiritual ties.
ねえ、テシ。高校卒業したらどうするの？
僕は恋町や佐久市から出て、見たこともないというか、もっと広くて、新しい場所に行きたいっていう気持ちはずっとあったんですね。特に高校生の頃は強くて。本当に東京でやっていけるのかなと思って、もう恋町の風景を全部覚えて記憶して、自分が好きだった眺めを全部頭の中に入れて東京に持っていこうというふうに思ったんですね。なので山を歩いて河原を歩いて、石の形も、川の色も、山の匂いも全部覚えて東京に持っていこうというふうに思っていたのを今でも覚えてますね。
At this point, the story shifts its setting, moving away from the rural town of Itomori as Mitsuha wakes up in the body of Taki, a high school boy living in the city of Tokyo.
And probably the most striking aspect of how Shinkai portrays Tokyo in Your Name is just how accurate it is. Because so many of the locations he uses throughout the film are actually one-for-one depictions of real places across the city.
The locations of Your Name are primarily focused in central Tokyo, in the Minato, Shibuya and Shinjuku areas. Taki and Miss Okudera's date, for example, takes place in the entertainment district of Roppongi, where they start out at Roppongi Hills for a city view before heading over to the National Art Centre to have lunch and see a photography exhibition. And what's interesting is not just the fact that the locations are real, but the details and shot compositions themselves are based on real images Shinkai and his team would photograph. Over the years, this technique has become iconic to Shinkai's style, from earlier works such as 5 centimeters per second to the more recent Weathering With You. Many of the locations and backgrounds are completely accurate to real life, often based on locations in Shinjuku, where Shinkai had lived since he moved to Tokyo in 1992. His 2013 film The Garden of Words is primarily set in Shinjuku Gyoen, which, incidentally, is what Taki's apartment overlooks in Your Name. He also works in a nearby Italian restaurant, based on the real-life Café La Bohème. From a directing standpoint, there are several reasons why Shinkai does this. In his own words, the scenery of Tokyo may look like nothing special in a live-action film or a photo, but sometimes you find the beauty of it when it becomes a drawing.
東京の風景ってやっぱりこうパッと見てその美しさって少し田舎に比べて分かりにくいと思うんですよ、汚い場所だなって最初はやっぱり思ったんですよね、その 2,3 年ぐらいその気持ちが拭えなくて、でも自分があんまり綺麗じゃない場所に住み続けてるっていうのが結構きつくなってくるんですよ、そうすると何とかしてこの場所を好きになりたい、その綺麗な風景の見方を発見したいっていう気持ちになってきて、
But it's not just about the landscapes, for it's this portion of the film where the movie's romance truly begins to take shape. Through their body swapping, Taki and Mitsuha's connection deepens, but it also grows more complicated as they navigate the pitfalls of living each other's lives. In many ways, it's not a typical love story, instead becoming entangled in knots of memory, time, and fate. And for that, Shinkai credits the influence of one Japanese novelist in particular.
村上春樹のこれも短編小説なんですけど、4月のある晴れた朝に 100% の女の子に出会うことについてっていう長いタイトルの短編があってですね。
The story follows a boy walking through Tokyo's Harajuku neighborhood, where he encounters a girl he instantly recognizes as his 100% perfect match. He imagines a scenario where he approaches the girl, and they realize they are perfect for each other. But in order to test their love, they agree to part ways, believing that if their connection is real, fate will bring them back together again. However, 12 years pass, and when they eventually do cross paths again, a faint glimmer crosses their minds that maybe they are the 100% perfect match. But it was too weak, and they pass each other by.
人がこうなぜ出会ったのかというのが実は忘れているだけなんだけど理由があったんだみたいなそんな風にもこう受け止められる小説で、それはきっと大きなヒントになっていると思います。
And it's this romance angle which ultimately becomes a driving force in the story, as after Taki's body swapping with Mitsuha mysteriously stops, he resolves to leave Tokyo to finally meet her in person. However, what they discovered was nothing like what they had expected. The town Taki once knew had been completely devastated, a casualty of a disaster from years before.
死んだ3年前に死んだ
ちょうど秋祭りの日だったみたい。
割れた彗星の一部が隕石となって日本に落下。8時42分祭りで人が集まっている場所にちょうど落ちたんだ。
The comet disaster had wiped out the entire town. Everyone he once knew, including Mitsuha, was long gone. And for a Japanese audience, this would evoke strong memories of one fateful day in particular.
Hello, good evening. Japan's Prime Minister has said the country's facing its worst crisis since the Second World War, and there are fears the death toll could reach tens of thousands.
A great earthquake has hit Japan, magnitude 8.4.
Catastrophic tsunami rising out of the Pacific. It's huge waves sweeping away everything in its path.
Plowing over buildings. You see homes, businesses, cars absolutely being caught up in this flood.
Do not go near the waters. Move to higher ground as soon as possible. Self-Defense Force personnel are currently contacting local governments.
Some images are now emerging of the damage caused by the quake.
The scope of this is just going to be unbelievable.
We're getting reports of several buildings on fire.
The images of destruction and flooding coming out of Japan are simply heartbreaking.
Concerns are now being raised over 3 separate nuclear reactors at Fukushima.
Japan now faces trouble at no fewer than 3 nuclear power stations.
More than 28,000 people are confirmed dead or missing.
Four months after the earthquake, Shinkai visited the disaster areas. Specifically here, the town of Yuriage in Miyagi Prefecture, which had been virtually razed to the ground.
In Yuriage, 1 in 5 residents lost their lives to the tsunami, approximately 800 people.
波の力で壁が壊されてるんですね。
What was once a busy seaport town had all but disappeared entirely.
And amidst this devastation, Shinkai came across this place, the Yuriage Minato and Tominushi Hime shrines, which were originally swept away by the tsunami, but they were rebuilt atop this small mountain, giving people the chance to pray for the victims whilst overlooking the disaster area.
フィクションの物語を作ることを仕事に選んだわけだけれど、現実にそういう以上のものが起こってしまうと、フィクションの役割が何なんだろうっていうふうには考えてしまって。
Shinkai was so moved by this site that he created this amazing illustration of it, which in many ways is reminiscent of the Miyamizu shrine in Your Name, which sits on top of the mountain in Itomori. But it doesn't end here, because Shinkai's visit to Yuriage in 2011 shaped Your Name in an altogether more profound way.
それまではどこでも言わなかったんですけれども、君の名はっていう映画の起点、最初の出発点は2011年に訪れた閖上名取だったんですっていうふうに、あの時閖上に立った時に自分がここにいた世界が十分にあり得たっていうふうに思ったんですね。もしも自分がここにいたらどうしただろう、もしも自分が閖上のあなただったらっていうふうにすごく思ったんですよ。もしも自分があなただったらっていう入れ替わりの映画を作ろうというふうに思ったんですよね。
And with this specific intention in mind, the movie's body swapping starts to take on a deeper meaning.
滝は、ね、もしも自分が三葉だったらどうするんだろうというふうに入れ替わりを通じてそういうことを感じているんだと思うんですよね。あるいは僕たちは君の名の映画を見て、もしも自分が滝のように入れ替わったら、そして三葉の立場になってしまったら、災害が起きると分かっていたら自分はどうするんだろうかっていうふうに考えていくと思うんです。
結び、本当に時間が戻るならもう一度だ
け。そういうことって現実にその通りのシチュエーションがあるわけではないですけれども、でもそういう日常にはないような極端な状況を設定すると、そこで人間がどういうふうに振る舞うかっていうその人間性みたいなものが分かりやすく浮き上がってくると思うんです。
このままだと今夜みんな死ぬ。だから私たちで。
そんなふうにこういうサイファイの特殊なシチュエーション設定っていうのは、人間がその人がどういうキャラクターなのか、いざという時にどういう行動をするのかっていうのをすごくクリアに浮かび上がらせてくれる機能があると思いますので、そうですね、そういう手法が僕は好きなんだと思います。
片割れ時だ。
そう、実際言葉にするのもちょっと難しいぐらい、この映画の中の時間の流れっていうのは少し複雑なんですけども、完全に時間軸を観客に理解させる必要はないんだと。でもその代わり滝と三葉の気持ちの流れ、それだけは、観客に興味を持ち続けてもらえるようにしなければいけない。あるいは観客が今滝はどんな気持ちなんだ、三葉はどんな気持ちなんだっていうことを観客はそこだけは分かっていなければいけない。
来た。大丈夫。まだきっと間に合
う。やってみる。
そうすることで実際に起こっている出来事はタイムラインはすごく複雑なんだけど、でも見ている時はさほどその複雑さを感じずに滝と三葉の行く末だけを楽しんで見ていられる。
津波にごっそりとさらわれた名取の死骸を形容するに良い言葉はないが、英語ならばブレステイキング。何か些細な違いで僕は長野ではなく仙台に生まれていたかもしれない。この町に育ったかもしれず、 であればこの土地を愛していただろうし、ならばもしかしたら津波にあったかもしれず、とにかくもう自分があの日ここにいたという世界は十分にあり得た。
それはまるで
夢の景色のように、ただひたすらに
美しい眺めだった。
君の名はこう強い思いで何かを取り戻す映画にしたいとは思ったんですよ。
And before we close this out, I want to take you back to Tokyo one last time and return to the question of why Shinkai depicts this city with such care in Your Name. Because as someone who's now lived here for several years, I can tell you this goes beyond just an accurate portrayal. There's an appreciation of this city entrenched in every frame and brushstroke of this film. And the reason why is depicted best in one specific scene.
御社を志望いたしました理由は、人が生活している風景が東京だっていつ消えてしまうかわからないと思うんです。だから記憶の中であっても、なんていうか人を温め続けてくれるような風景を。
Great disasters like 2011 or the comet from the movie remind us how fragile the things we take for granted can be, showing us how the people and places we love the most could disappear tomorrow. And I think that if Shinkai's works are anything, they're time capsules, using animation to carefully preserve Japan's beauty at this moment in time forever. But in Shinkai's story, the great disaster is ultimately avoided, unlike bitter realities, something which is also reflected in the film's romance thread. Typically, Shinkai's films were known for their bittersweet climaxes, where star-crossed lovers don't get together in the end. And the same can be said for Murakami's story, where the 100% perfect match ultimately let each other slip away. Your Name, however, teases this, but then subverts it, taking a different approach altogether.
君の名を見たお客さんから新海さんちょっと変わりましたねみたいに言われることが割と多いんですね。ただ何か大きく変えようと思ったわけでもなかったような気がします。
今はもうない街の風景になぜこれほど心を締め付けられるのだろ
う。アニメーションを作っていて何か後ろめたさのようなものを感じるようにだんだんなってきてしまったんですね。地震に遭った被災者の方の役に立つような仕事ではないとアニメーションはというふうに考えるようになりました。そのうちにアニメーションでしか、表現できないようなエンターテインメントでしか表現できないような、災害との向き合い方のようなものがないかなと考え始めて、